Okay, what I'm going to talk about has nothing to do with this vehicle, though I'm down here to work on it. But I was thinking today, they're talking about this whole deal with these SNAP benefits. That is a program that gets horribly abused. But if you remember back, I mean, before they started doing this all on cards and all that stuff, remember the days of government cheese when they were doing a surplus commodity program instead of this debit card system they went to, where you'd get, but there was some really great stuff that they were giving out besides the cheese because it was price supports for agriculture. That's why this whole welfare department is tied in with the Department of Agriculture, because it used to be that rather than paying farmers to not farm, they would actually have a price support system so that it was worth farming. Then the surplus commodities would be stored up and passed out to people who needed them. But there was great stuff. We used to get it in the school lunch program. A lot of the stuff was made up from the surplus commodities. But my God, the that was excellent quality food, and it was real food. It wasn't garbage. I mean, it was uh, like canned beef and canned pork and turkey and like a spam sort of stuff. That's what all your pizza burgers were being made out of at that time. But the school lunch programs really benefited from that. But for people, just individuals, uh, man, that was a windfall. I mean, and that was real food, real nourishment instead of this garbage that they buy with this program. I'd like to see them go back to that. I don't know why they ever quit that. Because it was, and then the good thing is then the government always had a built-in stockpile of food. That would be great in a disaster. I don't know why they quit that. But that was good food. That was unbelievable what they were giving out to people at that time. It made so much more sense because there was, like raisins and prunes, and it was everything that was encouraging the farmers to keep producing. Because otherwise, if they overproduce, then they can't sell. But this way, they could keep producing, they'd get a fair market price for it, and it would go to good use. That was, but it was amazing. The quality of that food was just top notch stuff, and it wasn't junk. But it was with the like honey. That's a lot of the honey production was because of the government subsidies. Same with wool. We always subsidized sheep ranchers because we always figured, okay, in case of a war, we want to have a supply of wool. So we had that wool program going. I don't know why they got away from that stuff. Because that wasn't being abused like this system is just rife for abuse. But the old way of doing it, the people who needed it got it, and the farmers were able to produce things and make a living at it without having to have bailouts from the government all the time. They do strange things, but that's why it was tied in with the agricultural department. But I hate to see that now where they're actually paying farmers to not farm or plowing crops under and getting paid for them. Whereas, we had a use for that surplus, and we still do. We have a need for it. But they like playing with bookkeeping instead. Well, I'm going to pull that carburetor off of this thing. Right, I'm sure people must remember back when they were doing that surplus commodities program. That was great, great stuff. But the one thing about this, this you can see like on the air cleaner, even there's a bunch of extra hoses. This was right when the EPA was first starting to interfere with vehicles. There isn't a lot of it, but there's mysterious little diaphragms and stuff more than are needed. But the one thing I do like, the crankcase or the ventilation for the fuel tank is actually a line that runs through. There's a charcoal fill canister right down there. Well, okay, that's better than when it was vented to the atmosphere, then you get condensation. I think I can unhook that, blow that back, pressurize the tank, unhook my fuel line at the pump, and I should be able to blow anything out of the fuel pump, or the whole line out of the tank, and clean that all out. But the temptation would be to get rid of a lot of this. I did convert this to a manual choke at one time. But I see little government interferences here that need to be. That's a pickup would run better without. So there's a temptation always. There's a little vacuum diaphragm back there. I have no idea what that is. It's going into the intake manifold. I'll maybe figure it out when I get the carburetor off of there. But they did like to interfere with stuff. And I think that's actually why they've got them high gear ratios, was trying to make the mileage look better, but it made it for a tough driving pickup. But this was just when they were starting on that garbage. Well, I actually even wonder why they took, because basically this is a 289 with a longer stroke. The pistons are the same size, the bore is the same, they just lengthened the stroke slightly, so the crank and the rods were changed. Now, I don't know what their theory was there, but I would think it would have some tie-in with the EPA, trying to make it, because shorter or longer stroke would, in theory, give you lower end power, but it really didn't. It really didn't on this. Well, that's very little. From a 289 to 302, that's very little change. You could overboard it a little and got that. But there's all kinds of potential there. And like I say, this is basically a modified 289. I could actually switch the crank and then rods and go back to a 289. Because it's different from the newer 302s. And then they changed the whole firing order and everything. And then you get into the camshaft. But I'll see when I get it apart. But first I want to get that carburetor off. At least, so if I can make the thing run, I can move it a lot easier. Though I do have, the tow apparatus on here. That you see every farmer has them. You see them going down the road, pulling a pickup behind, some machine and an anhydrous tank and a drill. They come with long trains of stuff, and the last one in the line is always a pickup with one of these on. This is a particularly nice one in that it swivels and snaps. It's very easy to hook up because you've got a lot of play in the machine until you pull forward, and it snaps into position. So I could pull it up into the yard, but I want to make it drive anyway, so I'll get that carburetor off of there and blow that fuel line out and see what comes out of the tank. And pop the distributor off and grind on them points a little bit because I'm sure they're rusted. But I'm one of them people that carries a little square of emery paper in my billfold, so I'm always ready. Everything I got's got points on it, so I carry emery paper. It's one of them must-haves.